The distance manager. The distance manager is the person who survives because they never let the fight fully begin. They're not the fastest puncher or the strongest hitter. They're the one who understands something most people never think about. Distance decides everything. If you control how close the other person can get, you control the danger, the decisions, and ultimately the outcome. In a street fight, chaos usually starts with someone rushing in, waving their arms, throwing wild punches, or trying to grab clothes. Most people either freeze or swing back without thinking. But the distance manager doesn't panic. Their brain goes straight into one instinct: create space, read movement, and make the other person chase shadows instead of your face. They don't back up in straight lines like beginners do. They circle, pivot, step diagonally, and constantly shift the angle so the aggressor keeps missing or reaching. They make the attacker waste energy, lose balance, and get frustrated. In a crowd, that can buy you seconds to get out. In a one-on-one scenario, it can expose the exact moment where you need to act. A good distance manager isn't flashy. They're subtle. They use their hands as frames not to punch, but to keep the opponent from entering clean. A stiff arm on the chest, a hand checking the shoulder, a palm creating just enough of a barrier to break momentum. This isn't fancy martial arts, it's simple survival mechanics. Keeping someone at arm's length can stop a lot of stupid decisions from turning into serious injuries. And when they strike, it's not volume, it's precision. One jab to the nose or one kick to the thigh is just enough to disrupt and not enough to get dragged into a brawl. They don't get greedy. Greed gets people knocked out or blindsided. When they hit, they immediately reset the distance again. That's the whole strategy. Touch and disappear. Their biggest strength is awareness. They're constantly scanning the environment, looking for exits, friends of the attacker, and even uneven ground. They try to never stand where someone can trap them. But the distance manager isn't perfect. If someone grabs their clothes, rushes aggressively, or traps them between cars or tables, the strategy can fall apart. Distance only works when there's actual space to manage. Still, out of every real-world strategy, controlling distance is one of the safest, cleanest, and least risky way to protect yourself. The clincher. The clincher survives by doing the exact opposite of what most people expect in a fight. Instead of backing up, swinging wild, or trying to trade punches, he shuts everything down by stepping forward. The moment someone throws a big punch or starts yelling in his face, he closes the distance, locks onto the body, and turns a wild, unpredictable brawl into something slow, heavy, and controlled. A real clinch isn't flashy. There's no technique show, no fancy trips. It's just pure survival instinct paired with good body mechanics. The clincher grabs the torso, the shoulders, or the neck, whatever he can touch first, and immediately collapses the chaos. Once he's glued to the other person, the fight changes instantly. Punches lose power. Wild swings turn into useless smothered shots, and the person who started the fight suddenly can't generate momentum, can't move freely, and can't fully rotate their hips. What makes the clinch so effective in survival scenarios is how uncomfortable it is for the average person. Most untrained people panic when space disappears. They freeze when they can't swing. They lose balance, get frustrated, and burn energy fast. Meanwhile, a good clincher stays calm. He presses his weight into the other person, keeps his head hidden, stays tight, and lets the other guy waste energy on nothing. The clincher doesn't want a long fight. He just needs a few seconds of control. And in those few seconds, he decides everything: where the fight goes, who falls, who stays standing, and when to let go. Sometimes he uses that control to push the aggressor into a wall. Sometimes he forces a stumble. Sometimes he just holds tight until bystanders intervene. And sometimes he creates the perfect moment to shove the other person away and run. But the clinch has risks too, and the clincher knows it. If the aggressor has friends, you're suddenly holding one guy while the others are free to swing. If a weapon appears, being tied up is a nightmare. And if the clinch collapses onto concrete, both bodies hit the ground hard. That's why the smart clincher never grabs out of pride. He grabs with a purpose: slow the situation down, end the threat, and get out before it turns into something worse. Still, out of every street fight strategy, the clinch is one of the most risky moves. It stops punches before they start, but it starts the fight and can be super dangerous if the guy has friends. The counter-striker. The counter-striker is the calm eye of the storm. While most people in street fights swing first and think later, this type of fighter does the exact opposite. He waits and watches. He reads the other person's tells, their breathing, the way they square their feet, how their shoulders shift before they throw something stupid. And when the punch finally comes, the counter-striker moves just enough to avoid it and punishes the opening. This style isn't built on speed or aggression, it's built on awareness. The counter-striker never wastes energy. He doesn't start yelling, doesn't rush forward, doesn't get baited by insults. He stands just out of range, calm in a way that almost looks disrespectful. He wants the other guy to swing first, because the first swing is almost always the sloppiest one. In street fights, there is no jab, no feint, and no setups. It's just big, predictable haymakers thrown with emotion instead of technique. And that's exactly what the counter-striker is built to exploit. When the strike finally comes, the counter-striker isn't reacting emotionally, he's reacting mechanically. A small slip and a lean back, and suddenly the aggressor is off balance, exposed, and wide open. That's where a clean hook, a stiff jab, or even just a shove can end the entire situation. But the real power of the counter-striker is psychological. When someone is angry and trying to intimidate you, they expect fear. They expect you to flinch, freeze, or show weakness. They do not expect you to stand relaxed, hands up just enough to defend yourself, eyes steady, breathing normal. That calmness breaks people before the fight even starts. It makes them overcommit, and when someone overcommits in a fight, they give away everything. Of course, this style has weaknesses. A counter striker can struggle in tight spaces where there's no room to move. If someone rushes in with a tackle instead of a punch, that patience becomes a liability. And if there are multiple attackers, waiting for the perfect shot is a luxury you don't have. Counters work great one-on-one against someone emotional and sloppy, but chaos with multiple people erases those clean openings. Still, in the kind of real-world fight that happens outside bars or at crowded gatherings, one angry person stepping forward with bad intentions will have a nightmare dealing with the counter striker, the first mover. The first mover is the opposite of cautious, the opposite of patient, and the opposite of waiting to see what happens. This fighter understands something most people never do. The person who moves first decisively and with commitment controls the entire fight before the other side even realizes it started. This isn't about being reckless or throwing the first wild punch. It's about recognizing when the situation has crossed the point of no return and acting before the other person can build momentum. The first mover reads the body language, and by the time the aggressor decides to swing, the first mover is already in their space. Their strength is initiative. While most people spend precious seconds processing fear or adrenaline, the first mover uses that same window to take control. They close distance fast, get chest to chest, jam the opponent's arms so they can't unload big shots, and immediately attack balance. Street fights are decided by surprise and pressure, and the first mover brings both in full force. This style works because most untrained people need space to generate power. They need room to throw big punches. The first mover denies all of that. They smother the attack before it exists. They overwhelm, not with fancy technique, but with pure forward momentum and commitment. The mental effect is huge. When someone wants to posture, talk, or scare you, they expect hesitation. They expect resistance later, not instantly. When the first mover closes the distance without warning, it rattles their entire plan. Fights are emotional, and the first mover uses that moment of shock to take over. But this style has real risks, and being honest about them matters. If you misread the situation and move first when there was still a chance to de-escalate, you become the aggressor. If the opponent is armed with a knife, bottle, or anything else, rushing in blindly can get you cut before you even realize what's happening. And if there are multiple attackers, charging in might put you right in the center of all of them. The first mover thrives in one-on-one situations where the threat is clear, but in chaotic environments, that commitment can backfire. Still, in the real world, when you truly have to fight and not argue, but actually defend yourself, hesitation is what gets people hurt. The first mover eliminates hesitation entirely. They decide, they commit, they act. And that alone wins more real fights than any spinning kick, fancy technique, or tough guy speech ever will. The Scrambler. The Scrambler is the fighter who feels most at home in the one place everyone else panics. Total chaos. When a fight turns into a blur of shoves, slips, tangled limbs, and bad footing, most people freeze or flail. The Scrambler doesn't. They flow with it and turn every mistake, every stumble, and every awkward position into an opportunity. Scramblers don't think in clean steps. They think in reactions. If they fall, they roll. If they get grabbed, they spin. And if they slip, they turn that slip into a weird angle that puts them on top. Their entire style is built around fast instincts and improvisation, shaped by hours of chaotic sparring, wrestling scrambles, or simply a lifetime of getting thrown into unpredictable situations. The Scrambler's biggest advantage is this: they never mentally crash. When most people get shoved hard or tripped, their brain panics and takes a second to reboot. In that second, the fight is already decided. The Scrambler thrives in those moments. They're already moving, already adjusting, already finding the next angle. They know how to regain balance mid-fall, how to twist out of grips, how to scramble up to their feet quicker than the other person can react. Their style isn't about dominating with strength. It's about staying ahead with movement, but there are risks. Scrambling takes a lot of energy. A scrambler who goes all in for 20 seconds can gas out fast if the fight doesn't end, and in a tight space like a hallway or a bathroom, their movement gets limited and their style loses its edge. Scrambling also doesn't help much against weapons or multiple attackers, where moving unpredictably might run you straight into someone else. Still, when it's one-on-one and messy, scrambling your way out is a solid trait to have. The technician. The technician is the opposite of chaos. While everyone else gets emotional, swings wild, or reacts on instinct, the technician stays calm and calculated. They're not the fastest or the strongest, but they're always the most efficient. Everything they do has a purpose behind it. Technicians are built from real training, real reps, and real pressure testing. They don't need a huge toolbox, just a handful of clean, reliable techniques they've practiced 1,000 times. In a street fight, that matters more than any flashy move. When adrenaline hits, your body only remembers what you've drilled. The technician has drilled everything. They keep their hands high, their balance centered, their steps small and controlled. Where others overextend and slip, the technician stays planted and sharp. They read the opponent's posture, not just the punches. They react to patterns, not threats. They're always 2 beats ahead. If someone rushes in, they angle off. If someone swings wide, they slip and counter. If someone grabs them, they break the grip with quiet confidence. They don't win with power. power. They win by letting the other guy make mistakes. The technician's biggest advantage is composure. Street fights feel fast and loud to everyone else. To the technician, it feels slowed down. They breathe while the other person holds their breath. They observe while the other person panics. They let the opponent burn energy and then take over when the chaos settles. And unlike the Scrambler, they don't need motion to survive. They can stay still, wait, and choose their moment. They know exactly when to punch, when to clinch, when to push someone away, and when to disengage entirely. They understand the consequences. They don't escalate unless they have to, but the technician has weaknesses too. Their calmness can work against them if they underestimate someone who charges aggressively or someone who doesn't fight logically. Drunk aggression, wild swings, or unpredictable reactions can throw off a technician if they rely too much on perfect scenarios. And if multiple attackers get involved, precision becomes less valuable than speed and escape. Still, in a one-on-one confrontation, the technician is one of the most reliable survivors. They don't rely on luck, instincts, or brute force. They rely on control of the situation, of the opponent, and especially of themselves. When everyone else is emotional, the technician is surgical. The Brawler. The Brawler is what most people picture when they think of a real street fight. This isn't technique first or strategy first. It's aggression, momentum, and pure stubborn will. The Brawler doesn't think about angles, footwork, or setups. When things go bad, they just go forward. What makes a Brawler dangerous is simple. They commit fully. No hesitation, no warming up, no testing the distance. The moment the fight starts, they explode with everything they have. Even if you're more skilled, getting rushed by someone who's strong, emotional, and unpredictable can overwhelm you if you're not ready. A Brawler thrives in chaos because they create chaos, but raw aggression cuts both ways. The Brawler's biggest weakness is their lack of control. They burn energy fast, their stance is wide, their chin is up, and every swing risks falling off balance. If they miss big, they stumble. If they rush in too hard, they crash into walls, cars, or the ground. And once that adrenaline spike fades, their gas tank empties almost instantly. A calm, trained opponent can survive the storm, then pick them apart when they get tired. Still, you can't underestimate them. Many Brawlers come from real experience with fights outside bars, at parties, or in bad neighborhoods. They've been hit before, choked before, slammed before, and they didn't quit. That toughness is hard to teach and even harder to face. For some Brawlers, pain doesn't slow them, it motivates them. They also fight with emotions. That makes them dangerous because they're not following a script. They might tackle, headbutt, grab clothes, bite, shove, or swing without patterns. You can't read them easily because even they don't even know what they're about to do. In a real street fight, unpredictability is a weapon. But here's the truth. A Brawler is a ticking clock. If you can stay calm, avoid the first rush, and not get overwhelmed, their entire game starts falling apart. Once the fight slows down, the Brawler loses their advantage. They're like a wildfire, powerful, fast, and destructive, but they burn out quick. The hybrid fighter. The hybrid is the person who doesn't fight with one style, one strategy, or one mindset. They fight with whatever works right now. They're not married to boxing, wrestling, grappling, or kicks. They're married to survival, and that makes them extremely difficult to predict, control, or overwhelm. A hybrid fighter is usually someone with just enough experience in multiple areas to stay calm, no matter where the fight goes. Maybe they've boxed a little, rolled in a jiu-jitsu gym, wrestled in school, or learned clinch work working security. They're not specialists, but they're not clueless. They've seen enough to stay relaxed during chaos, and that calmness is their greatest weapon. Where most people freeze when the fight changes range, the hybrid adjusts instantly. If someone swings wildly, they cover up, angle off, and counter. If someone rushes in, they clinch, frame, or trip. If the fight hits the ground, they scramble, stand up, or stall instead of panicking. The hybrid doesn't fight emotionally, they fight situationally. They don't care about winning, they care about not losing, which is exactly what real-world survival actually demands. Another key trait is problem solving. They don't force their favorite move. They feel the moment and pick what makes sense. If punching feels risky, they clinch. If the clinch feels dangerous, they break away. If the ground feels unsafe, they stand immediately. Every action is a small adjustment to pressure, space, and opportunity. Hybrids are also great at disengaging, something most martial artists overlook completely. They know that walking away safely is worth more than landing the perfect knockout that comes from experience, maturity, or simply not needing to prove anything. They use their hands and voice the same way, calm, steady, and controlled. They de-escalate first, react only when they must, and disappear before things escalate further. That alone makes them safer than 90% of people. The downside? They're not unbeatable. Against a true specialist, a sharp boxer, a high-level wrestler, or a real grappler, a hybrid might get overwhelmed in that area. But their strength isn't dominance, it's adaptability. You can overwhelm them in one spot, but you won't trap them there for long. They always find a way to slip out, circle away, or shift the fight into a range they understand. A hybrid fighter is the closest thing to street smart mixed with actual ability. Not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most technical, just the hardest to finish. They survive because they think, they stay calm, and when things go bad, they don't panic, they adjust. If you want more brutally honest breakdowns like this, hit subscribe and join the channel. Tell me in the comments which style you think is the most realistic and what topic you want next. Let's keep going deeper into the real side of fighting.